Here are a few examples of using trigonometry to find angles. The main thing to remember about finding an angle using trigonometry is that you're using the inverse function. Inverse functions are used to find angles. So if I was looking for x in the top triangle there, it all goes back to SOHCAHTOA. SOHCAHTOA. And looking at this triangle, I see that opposite x is 132, and opposite the right angle, the hypotenuse is 166. So I have opposite and hypotenuse. Opposite and hypotenuse is sine, but I'm using an angle. I'm looking for an angle. So the inverse sine of, and this time, because I'm looking for an angle, I plug in the ratio, and it's opposite over hypotenuse, which is 132 over 166. So I'll go to my calculator, making sure it's in degrees, and the inverse sine of 132 divided by 166 is about 50 to the 10th, about 52.7 degrees. In the second triangle, if I'm looking for x, I see that 132 is the opposite and 94 is the adjacent. Opposite and adjacent, that is tangent. So I'm going to use the inverse tangent because I'm looking for an angle. Because I'm using the inverse tangent, I need to plug in a ratio, and the ratio is opposite over adjacent, 132 over 94. And the inverse tangent of 132 divided by 94 is to the 10th about 54.5 degrees. Last triangle there, I'm going to find x at the top. 196 is the hypotenuse, 170 is the adjacent, adjacent and hypotenuse. Adjacent and hypotenuse is cosine. Because I'm finding an angle, I'll use the inverse function. Because I'm using the inverse function, I plug in a ratio. Adjacent over hypotenuse, 170 divided by 196. So the inverse cosine of 170 divided by 196 is about 29.8 degrees. Key things to remember are, if you're finding side lengths, you're going to use a normal sine, tangent, and cosine, and you'll be plugging in an angle. If you're finding angles, you use the inverse function, and you plug in a ratio, and your answer ends up being an angle.